Microphones. It's how you're hearing me right now, and there's probably 30 of them in your room, and a lot of them are kinda garbage. Size and power play a large role in how well a microphone can sound. Larger microphones can fit more internals and bigger diameter capsules, generally creating a better sound overall. There's a lot of science to this, and it's a lot of complexity that I honestly don't feel like explaining. Not because I couldn't, but just because I'm lazy. And this is a pilot, so the most common microphones that people probably deal with are USB microphone, kinda like this blue snowball, or these headphones, or hell, even these headsets. Or, in more professional settings, they might deal with something like an XLR microphone. As I am a professional and a big nerd, my weapon of choice is the Electronics X1 that I purchased from Guitar Center way back in 2020 for $50 used. And for a while, it's my default microphone. I paired it with a Behringer U2 and then upgraded to Native Instruments. But unfortunately, the microphone seems to be on its last legs, and I'm being bullied in Discord relentlessly for it. And I think it's time for a change. Okay, so the simple solution is to go out there and buy a new XLR microphone. There are lots of cheap solutions out there. There's the AT2020, the Behringer C1 if the C stood for crap, Temu knockoffs, and anything that you find on AliExpress, and so on and so forth. But these low-tier microphones are exactly that, low-tier microphone. If you're like me, you might be familiar with the company Neumann. It's a company that came out of Germany in 1928 and has been the gold standard of microphone manufacturing and mic quality for almost 100 years. And they had their repertoire and the price to match. I mean, look at this. Ouch. And to be quite frankly, I'm kind of tired of bedroom engineers and producers spending $2,000 thinking that this microphone is going to make them the next big thing. You don't have to spend that much money to get a good quality mic. This is kind of like buying an LV bag when you don't really need an LV bag, you just want to flex, but a Coach bag will basically do the same thing, and you're just kind of looking to have the vibe that you have the money, but maybe necessarily don't. So then I asked myself, could my wannabe product engineering create a microphone that sounded good for $100? Probably. Okay, realistically, yeah, I could buy a secondhand used microphone, modify it, and then reuse it for cheap. But have you seen the used section at Guitar Center recently? It's disgusting. I know, I don't have to do any of this stuff, but I wanted to make a microphone that didn't just sound good, it also looked good. Sexy, even. And this channel is no longer about funny car reviews. It's now about design language and color theory and a number of other things, because this is now a portfolio for my professional career. Hey, I mean, I know that's the last thing you want to hear, but at least I'm being honest, and at least after all these years, I'm trying again, so cut me some slack. Okay, so what are the requirements? Well, number one, it has to look good. We'll get to the design stage later, but the most important thing is that you want to be able to show this off as a proof of concept, and it wouldn't feel out of place using it in a studio environment. Number two, it has to sound good. Sound quality is subjective, but there's some things that we can define. One, a low static noise or interference. Two, a good noise floor, which means I can pick up a lot without having to crank it to the max, which creates noise and distortion. And three, that it can clearly be A and B tested against the X1, which I'm using right now, and hold its own. Number three, it has to be portable. A heavy microphone requires a heavy duty stand, and a chunky microphone can't fit in my backpack, so it has to be roughly the same overall footprint as the X1. I'd love for it to be the same size as a Teenage Engineering CM15, but I doubt that is possible, mostly because a quick Google search revealed that no view of internals has been published, and for a microphone this expensive, I doubt anybody felt that it was worth cannibalizing to find out. Now last but not least, it has to be under $100. Microphones operate on extraordinary margins of 40 to 60% according to what I can find online. But depending on how many are sold, this number could be different. Obviously as a one-off, this can cost way more than just $100 in time, research and development, but I think that the parts total should strive to be under $100. Okay, so there's like a million resources that we can use. We have Reddit, Instructables, Group DIY, and of course, YouTube. And there's also microphone kits that are available from large companies that we can put together ourselves at home. But I'm a little bit wary of these. See, these companies have an incentive, rightfully so, to make a profit, which means that they oftentimes source parts from cheap manufacturers over in China or other countries, and then mark them up and sell them at a higher cost. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go with this option. If you feel like you have the cash for it, then go ahead. But it's very possible that we can find these individual parts for cheaper on our own, especially from websites like Amazon, eBay, Temu, or AliExpress. And with that being said, I feel like it'd be a lot more fun to go that route than to rely on somebody else sourcing it for us. A quick scroll through any major online forum will give you a lot of choices. And in fact, I kind of felt inundated with how many choices I had. From Oracle to Group DIY to microphoneparts.com, these were the big three resources that I would recommend to try. and so I decided to get started by scrolling through them and getting an idea of what it was that I was looking for. But before I did any of that, I first wanted to take a look at r/audio engineering, which is kind of the gold standard of where I get all my information from. God bless them, it's a great treasure trove of how to get started in audio engineering, how things work, and how you too can become a DIY warrior, or at least what microphone or kits or devices to purchase. So I definitely recommend checking them out. Let's start with Group DIY. It's best known as the holy grail of the DIY microphone community. Yes, there's Instructables, but Group DIY is a lot more audio specific, meaning that it tends to focus more on specific parts that make up a microphone as opposed to the large breadth of creations that you can find in Instructables. So after scrolling an endless thread of queries and other options and big words that I've never seen before in my life that scare me, I kind of came away defeated. Yeah, there were a lot of good options, but they all assumed that you and I were basically engineers, people who had experience with PCB design and soldering, whereas I've never even held a soldering iron outside of high school before. So I decided to head over to Oracle, a website that could best be described as a 1990s microphone website with its beautiful HTML5 wonky design. It's nostalgic. I digress. I scrolled the website and found some mics that were honestly really promising stuff. For $103, you could get a 460 FET kit, but for $109, you could complete that kit. They also had a larger tube microphone kit for about $188, which is way outside of our budget, but still pretty cool in my opinion. Another thing that I noticed was the PCBs were only $7. Now, I don't know if that's a steal or not, but once again, it was pretty cool. Something that I didn't quite understand was the cost of the housing. Punching it at $70 before tax and using the cheaper kit would mean that the components would only be $33. And I'm no accountant, but spending 7% of our budget on a mic body doesn't make much sense. Now, if it's possible to have the components and no mic body and instead choose our own, then this would be a killer deal, but at $103 before shipping and handling, it unfortunately goes over our budget. Something to know about this is that this website is real DIY, like nothing comes assembled. This is the equivalent of going to Home Depot, buying the materials to build a desk, and then ending up cutting the wood at your own house. Nothing comes pre-assembled, and this is definitely not for the faint of heart, which is probably why the prices are so cheap. So Mic Parts functions a lot like Oracle, but on a larger scale. Whereas Oracle is probably just a team of a few people, Mic Parts is a whole community of people. Guides, kits, advanced circuit kits, you name it, they got it. I decided to hit up the resources for DIY beginners, as I am a DIY beginner, and they had a little soldering practice kit, which I just want to say is really cool. Soldering is pretty damn hard, and buying components and messing them up on your first try would really suck, so maybe I should use a soldering practice kit. Anyways, they had a pretty neat list going, from hardest to most difficult, especially designed for people like me whose heads sound like maracas whenever they shake. But the first set of mods were actually just mods done to a microphone that already had a capsule installed. This was a basic capsule replacement. Take a used microphone, add their capsule, and then success is guaranteed. But did you want to take a guess at how much one of their capsules cost? Go ahead, you can pause the video and take as much time as you need. I'm going to tell you anyway shortly. Did you pause the video? Alright, cool. $170. At the time of writing, I thought it was $129, but it ended up being $169 before taxes and fees for a microphone capsule. Oh, and by the way, this same microphone capsule is available on AliExpress for $25. According to the Reddit post that I found, what they're actually doing is cherry picking a large set of these capsules and then finding the best ones to sell for $169. So if the RK47 costs $169, then it made me wonder, well, how much would a kit cost? Oh, I see. $259 to support a small business isn't ridiculous, but considering I still have to assemble the thing myself, this definitely isn't optimal compared to the other options we have out there. At this point, I kind of began to lose hope. These three resources were touted as the big three of Reddit recommendations, so I was worried that I was missing something. I began to bounce between the three of them repeatedly, trying to figure out if there was anything that pointed to giving me what I needed for this product. After a couple of hours, I just kind of gave up. I knew that I was priced out of microphone parts, and getting a kit on technicality didn't seem right. Group DIY was far too disorganized for me to continue to parse for info. Do I ask for help? Do I make a post on Reddit and hope someone reaches out with some advice? Could I even get this script and project written in 1 month? Oracle and Group DIY had two microphones that were my go-to options. But just as I was scraping the bottom of the barrel, my voice over Jehovah, the microphone assassin himself, had a video published on how to put together a cheap microphone for $100 using only 3 components. And like a magpie to a shiny object, I flocked. Soldering required, a used body, I knew I was onto something. I watched the video a couple of times to compare how his microphone that he made at home sounded to a $2,000 professional microphone, but honestly on a set of AirPod Pros, I was kind of hard pressed to find the difference. The thing about microphones and any sort of audio is that it's highly dependent on the listening factors, but that's a conversation for an entirely different time. But this discovery opened up a completely new side of the internet for me. I had finally discovered a holy grail, the Alice board. And the place where I could find it pre-soldered and ready for sale was JLI Electronics, which was a treasure trove of information, parts, and guides. So I ended up diving onto the website and taking a look at a couple of their parts. And this is where we leave the research part and we start looking at the parts list as a whole. This build is relatively simple with three main components comprising the microphone. The first one is the OPA Alice single board. Coming in at $35, this board is pre-soldered with everything we need to wire a capsule and an XLR input straight to it. It's also the easiest way for us to get started on any future projects that might involve microphones. And for $35, you can't go wrong. The next component I had to go with was the capsule. After spending several hours deciding whether or not I want to go with a larger capsule or a smaller capsule, I ended up going with the JLI 255. I'm not reading all that. I'm putting it on screen. I'm not doing all that. Nope. The last thing I had to decide was where I wanted the microphone to go in. And one of the things that caught my eye was this microphone body that I found in Unstructables form. It's beautiful. It was everything I ever wanted. But after considering how I would have to transport this and put it in my backpack, it didn't fit the requirements. And so I reluctantly went with the CAD GXL 1800 microphone. While it's not my first choice, and quite frankly I felt kind of repulsed at having to buy such a cheap microphone, the bodies seemed to be in good condition and they were widely available for only $18 on Amazon. Especially with free shipping, I can't complain. Now a lot of you are probably wondering, well, why not go with a microphone body? Well, the thing about those microphone bodies is that they're meant to be ordered in bulk, meaning that when you order them by yourself, you're oftentimes getting a worse deal than just picking up a reused microphone, gutting the internals, and then cramming in brand new stuff. They also don't come with an XLR input, which is what we need to connect this to our interface and our Alice board. With everything coming in at just $60 on the JLI website, with me adding a capsule holder because I wasn't able to find anything about the microphone we picked up, along with some hardware, it gave us enough money in our budget to consider other things that we might want to take a look at, such as the overall design or any extra parts that we might need.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I completely messed up. I had a couple of videos recorded showcasing and highlighting everything that I had taken a look at. The microphone, I opened it up, I took a look at the internals, and it turns out that the microphone that I use attached to the camera, I used the wrong cable. So there was just no audio. If any of you are familiar with audio or video production, you know that the type of 3.5mm cable that you use is very important. I decided to use the wrong one, and now that footage is useless. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, while on camera, take a look at what we have and show it to you that way, and so that way we can take a look at what we have. So the first thing that we have is the CAD GXL 1800. That's the microphone that we ordered off of Amazon. As you can see here, it's relatively small. I would say probably fits right here in the palm of my hand. Super small microphone. Not a lot going on inside. Very simple construction. Screw off the bottom, and the whole microphone comes apart in three little pieces. Okay, so some of you are probably wondering what the microphone looks like now that it's been disassembled, and here it is. So it's something really basic. I completely disassembled it. There's only two screws at the top here and right here, attaching this part of the microphone to it. It has a little windscreen inside of it, which I thought was actually really cool. A lot of these are open mesh design with nothing obscuring it, but cool nonetheless for an $18 microphone. So this is the microphone. Oop, nearly dropped it there. Really basic small diameter capsule right here. Lots of plastic holding in place. Two cables at the back. And then we have our PCB, which is very Spartan. We have three cables going to the XLR input, two cables going to the capsule. Nothing very special about it overall. I would say it's actually quite boring, all things considered, in comparison to OPA Alice board, which is relatively small, relatively affordable in comparison to this. Probably not unless you buy it in bulk, but you can see here that it's actually quite large and a lot more complex. I feel like this one definitely has a lot more detail. And then we have our capsule. So we have our 22mm capsule. It was relatively It looks relatively small in comparison to what we have in something like the X1, but if you compare it to this microphone, you can see it's actually the same size as the whole body, and this is just a capsule by itself. And then last but not least, we have basic things such as the hardware for mounting the microphone. It's a little plastic 3D printed part. This part was I think $5. I was actually kind of irritated by that, but have our little hardware. So we have like little rubber grommets, some screws, some washers. So nothing too complex overall. These 4 components will make up the basis of our microphone. And if you look at the microphone the way it's designed, you can really see that it's just 4 components also. Well, besides the body and stuff like that. Capsule, body, XLR, wires, put it together, and that's how you get yourself a microphone. So now we can officially get started on the soldering part of it, and we don't have to worry about anything else. Relatively simple, easy to repair from the way that it looks, but it should be very easy for us to put together. So let's get soldering.
If anybody was wondering what the CAD Audio GLX 1800 sounded like, now you know. So I'm speaking roughly about a foot away from the microphone, regular 50% gain, no effects applied. And here you can compare it to all the audio you were hearing before that was recorded on the SE Electronics X1. See, this is the part where we actually get into build. The first thing I did was to completely disassemble the old microphone by starting to cut the wires going to the capsule. And then shortly after that, cutting the wires going to the XLR input. I want to keep as much wire as possible, so I decided to keep the cutting to a minimum and be as conservative as possible. Then I unscrewed the placeholder for the capsule at the top. And after those 2 short screws, I decided to work my way down and take out the main board that was attached to the microphone by another 2 Phillips head screws. A lot of you probably noticed that the video has sped up quite considerably, and that's because what we're doing now is a lot of boring work. What I didn't realize was that this was going to be the easiest part of the build, and everything after that was going to be downhill, and the mistakes that I made here were going to ultimately end up haunting me further down the line. Now this is where the mistakes start to pile up. Now after that, I decided that it's going to be a good idea to start applying some glue. So I decided to take JB Well's Super Weld and then directly apply it to the plastic. Now one thing to know about JB Weld is that it's highly toxic. It sticks to your finger really easily. I have it on 4 of mine. Now like the moron I am, I decided to go to Home Depot and pick up the cheapest soldering iron and solder I can possibly find. Now this solder happened to come with the soldering tool and was so completely garbage that I could not get it to melt consistently. I actually struggled so hard to get the thing soldered that I decided it was easier for me to do this off camera. It ended up taking me an entire hour just to get the whole thing done, and I partially blamed that on my tools and my lack of skill. Okay, and here it is. After a lot of hours of work, I finally got everything soldered using this crappy garbage Weller Home Depot solder. It was absolutely terrible. The solder was everything was terrible. The whole thing was terrible. The cables at the bottom connected to the XLR kept disconnecting. I didn't have the proper tools, so I mean a lot of it was definitely my fault. The battery in the camera is about to die for sure, but I do have it fully assembled. The only thing now is to put it back in its body and see how it runs. iPhone Handycam right here. My camera died, which means that I was unable to finish filming this on an actual proper camera. I apologize, but I want to make sure I get the video done. So I did some testing with the microphone and it is picking up my voice, but there seems to be a lot of noise interference. I'm not exactly sure what happened, if it was just faulty grounding, faulty wiring, my lack of the RF impeding transistors that go at the bottom here near the XLR inputs. It was a very difficult build. I didn't feel like I had the proper tools or experience to get it done, and I think this resulted in not having a proper build, which is sad. It's unfortunate, but that's the whole point of research and testing and learning to do things, is that sometimes things don't always go your way, and it's important even now. I'm acknowledging that, you know, you keep working on things like this. I mean, this was my first time ever doing something like this. I was completely new to the audio world, and I knew that it wouldn't be easy, especially with the tools that I had available. So I know I need to invest in new tools. But overall, the build, you know, took place over the course of a month and, a month and a half, doing all this research and editing and stuff for the video. and it's a real big bummer to see that the microphone is not working. However, I don't want to get anybody discouraged. I feel that if you think, you know, you can do this yourself, definitely give it a try. I'll put a link to everything in the description down below, instructions, guides, whatever you need. But I want to say that the juice really wasn't worth the squeeze for me. There was a lot of good microphones out there for the cost of this microphone, and while it does have a lot of potential, I will acknowledge, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something, or you'd be hard pressed not to find something that suits you, you know, in this day and age. But for a first project and for a first upload in a while, it's kind of a bummer to see that this was a failure. But all in all, I mean, I'm overall very positive. I want to thank you guys all so much for watching and coming along with this journey. But yeah, unfortunately, the CAD audio, the OPA Alice board just didn't work for me, but it might work for you. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll make sure to see you guys in the next one.